All right, everyone, and we're live. Welcome. We'll give a second here as people join. We've got 32 participants joining so far, 43. All right, ramping up fast. I think we had over 1,300 registrations here, so it's going to be a big one. And hey, we're going to be diving in for intros in a sec, but guys, let's make this interactive. So please head down as you're jumping in here, head down to the chat. Just let us know your name, where you're from, let us know your city. Love to know your role, what company you're with. Really help us customize this here. And all right, we're up to 140 participants. And again, for those that just joined, please jump into the chat. Throw your name down there. Throw your title. Throw where you're from. We've got Yair from Tel Aviv. Welcome. Luke, welcome from Denver. Jennifer, New Jersey. Brian from Alberta. Yeah. Hey, Vancouverite right here. Shout out to the Canadians. I love it. And we got, wow, lots of people from all over the world and all sorts of different roles here within the sales sphere. And I'm not surprised because when you look at the content we're going to be going through, man, it's going to be applying to just so many different roles and people. We're up to 170 participants so far. And guys, you know what? We want to just make the most of everyone's time. So let's absolutely dive in. Just quick housekeeping before we do the introductions and talk more about the specifics of the webinar. Number one, if you're having trouble with audio, just go ahead and keep the screen on, mute yourself, turn the sound down, and jump in with the call-in details that you've been sent in the invite and in the registration invite. Any questions you have, we want to make this super interactive as much as we possibly can anyway, right? So I don't want to disrupt Nate's rhythm too much here today, but I know that he specifically asked that, hey, let's really make this engaging. So he and I will be having some dialogue with me being the moderator, but also we'll be trying to get to as many questions as we can as we go through where it makes sense. We'll be adding some time at the end for that as well. Also, just so you know, yeah, take good notes, but so you know, we're recording this. We're going to be sending an email to you afterwards with the recording, along with a few slides that will be some sort of Cole's notes, so to speak. So that has the housekeeping out of the way. What I would say, though, one last thing is when you're asking your questions, can you please put it in the Q&A? Because it tends to get lost in the chat, whereas the Q&A, we've got Alex who's helping co-moderate here and behind the scenes, and he'll help serve up your questions. Okay, so with that housekeeping out of the way, let's dive in. Quick introductions before we jump in. I'm Dave Kennett. I'm your moderator today, and welcome to the State of Deals 2020 webinar. I'm from Replays. I'm the founder and CEO. Just a quick second on that. If you haven't heard of Replays, for sales leaders who don't have enough time to do the call coaching that they love to do, we do that for them with our 100 best practices framework. But we're not here to talk about that today. What we're here to talk about, and my guess is why we had so many registrants, is, listen, we all know our world got flipped a little bit upside down or a lot upside down just a handful of weeks ago. And how our pipeline looks, how the discussions with our prospects look, are all different and overnight. And man, I don't know about you, I wish I could just jump into a piece of technology that walked and look at a dashboard and all the data that monitored deal flow, right? And across industry and around the world to understand what trends are. And the good news is we've got someone today that can actually do that, has done that, has extracted some of those trends. And he'll be sharing that today along with a bunch of really interesting third-party research as well, all compiled to give you insight on really what is happening in buying behavior right around the globe right now. And so I'm super excited to have Nate Gilmore, CRO of PandaDoc, to join us. Nate, over to you for an intro, and I'll let you take her from here.
Thanks, Dave. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I'm really excited to be on Sales Hacker, and Dave, it's an honor to get a chance to kind of work with you on this. Just like 30 seconds on PandaDoc, and then I'll be done with that. PandaDoc is a document automation software platform for revenue teams that want to streamline the process of creating, approving, and e-signing proposals, quotes, and contracts. So that's relevant because today is about kind of the two research reports we pulled together as an organization. The first is we partnered with G2 Crowd to talk about kind of SaaS purchasing and what's going on pre and post COVID. So I'm going to present 5 or 6 slides about like the state of purchasing and what G2 is seeing on their data to help everybody kind of get an idea of what is happening post COVID. And the second thing is really this research product we did called the state of the deals. And I'll talk about this a couple more times, but we looked at the aggregate deal data off the PandaDoc platform, and we did surveys with hundreds of sales leaders off platform to help them understand, to help us kind of understand the patterns that elite sales teams have, and kind of to formulate like how deals are becoming more dynamic. So today's presentation is really about the tale of these 2 research projects. So I'll just jump in. So this is going to come as no surprise to anybody, but 88% of businesses have shifted pretty unexpectedly to remote work in the COVID pandemic. We're going to talk about like how this specifically impacts sales teams in a little bit, but first let's talk about like what's happening on the buy side. And so G2 Crowd did a bunch of research in 2020 with us. In March. And what we found is that actually software use is increasing since the switch to remote work. So specifically SaaS software, which is off-prem, right? So customers are expecting to buy at least one new software product. But what actually happened is COVID changed their priorities a lot, right? Some customers, about a quarter, are expecting to buy 5 or more new apps, especially if they weren't in a remote, they weren't ready for remote. They're going to have to buy a bunch of software to do that. But more interesting than that is, I'll tell you like how many of them expect to keep this software later. But the spend is increasing, and 47% think spend is increasing, and expect this figure to stay the same going into post-COVID. So software still being bought. This is accelerating, I think, a software transition, and the SaaS transition is continuing and perhaps accelerating.
And so, Nate, question for you there. I mean, I know when this thing hit, first of all our customers were in shell shock. I was in shell shock, right? And there was a period of a week there where our customers found, and I found, deals just slipped. And then people started realizing, okay, business needs to go on here, and what should it look like? Now, I'm happy to see there's some silver linings here. That's super exciting. And I've already seen this presentation, so I know there's some neat things and good insight. Can you help us, though, with the dissonance of when we see that, hey, there's intent to buy and more software spending for the folks that are on this call that are in the trenches in sales, or sales leaders that are, giving a forecast to their CFO, their CEO, that aren't as rosy, where they're not seeing that intent to buy actually translating into deals closed. What do you got for us there? I mean, where's the dissonance, do you think?
I think it has everything to do with these 2 slides, which is where, like, what categories are increasing. And I think it has a lot to do also with vertical specific. So I think that in talking to some of our customers, as well as looking at our own sales funnel, we have certainly seen very specific slippage across heavily impacted verticals. And then also, depending on kind of the product that you're selling, where that actually gets reprioritized in in somebody's budget. And so like what we're seeing is there's been a very large uptick specifically in collaboration, communication, process, and productivity. These are all on the rise, right? And the previous slide before that was about virtual meetings and like this great increase in stuff for distributed workforces. So, I mean, let's be clear. If the business is expecting to continue to sell and isn't 100% shut down, like a restaurant or entertainment or something like that, then the first order of business is, can my team handle remote, and how? And then what do we need to do to move our processes remote? I was just looking at some data specifically on kind of the signature market and seeing how it was a massive spike for a couple of weeks, and now it's coming down. It's still going to be higher than normal, but it's coming off some massive spikes. Dave, did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did for sure. And, I know one of our goals that you and I share here today is we want to just make sure that there's a bunch of actionable information. So people aren't only looking at trends, but how they can actually translate that into moving a sale forward. We just had a question, and I'm happy to jump in or at least start on this one from Bharat. So, what do you suggest is good sales strategy for an enterprise software to be positioned well. And I think, seeing some of these trends that we're talking about here, and your specific point earlier about there's more people getting involved in deals, and often people are being budgets are being more scrutinized. It's all about actually, or what we're finding anyway, it's all about creating that ROI case early. So that ROI case always should have been made, whether it's to your champion or what have you, but everything's bubbling up, it seems, to the CFO a lot quicker. And the CFO, of course, is looking at it through the lens of an ROI. So I guess my 2 cents to Bharat there would be build an ROI case, right? And early, and don't just think about your direct buyer persona in the form of the champion, but think about the CFO. Anyway, I don't want to bog us down too much here, Nate, because I know we're talking more about that later, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. And I specifically, this would be a great question to come back to after we get through kind of like some of the state of the deals report, because he's actually asking the question of, what does an elite sales team do in a change of economic buying, and what are some of the things that are not changing around number of people in a deal, changing in decision makers, having to present that ROI, but also having to build that ROI with the buyer over time. And so that level of personalization. So let's get into that in 1 second. Let's chat for a second. Let me close the loop up on something on purchases made during COVID, and maybe a little bit of insight from 2008 and 2009 that I had. So first of all, buyers are looking to buy software for distributed teams, and there's a lot of added pressure right now for these teams, and these deals are becoming much more dynamic. So what we're seeing here is that G2's measurement is that even after post-COVID, people are expecting to keep the software that they're buying. And so in 2008, 2009, one of the big trends that happened was the movement from on-prem to SaaS. And in 2020 with COVID, I think we're going to be seeing the trend from office to remote, and the idea that the company has to have the infrastructure to support these remote workers, and the likelihood that all of these like products and services that people are buying to remain is actually really high, especially given an unknown return to kind of normalcy, whatever that is anymore. So I'll keep on rolling here. But so I think what for sales hackers specifically, it's like, okay, great, right? Like we understand that some people are still buying and certain things are still selling. We also know that with remote work increasing, we know that remote selling is going to happen, and we've already seen, probably most of us are experienced in a sales team that isn't all in the same room. But as we get through this remote selling, I want to pick up some patterns here that we're going to talk about in a minute, which is consensus gets more challenging, and more people, more locations, more changes to documents in remote selling, because all of your buyers are remote now as well. They're not all at the water cooler, they're not at the same business. And these deals are happening, this change is happening much faster across deals, stakeholders. So we're seeing a trend towards this dynamic deal to accelerating. But what I'm curious about, Dave, is whether or not you want to talk a little bit about a poll.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know you and I both want to know what the folks that are listening in right now are experiencing. So we're actually going to drop a poll here for you in the next, once it's live, we're going to give you about, there we go, should be live now on your screen. We're going to give you 20 seconds to answer this. And if you could please just very quickly answer these 3 questions, and we'll go through the results. Super interested to see what the experience has been from the folks on the call, because I mean, this is the folks largely that are on the selling motion, and you're bringing a lot of the data from the buying motion. So I'm interested to see how those two pair up.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting. So let's talk a little bit about consensus. Let's talk about more people's change on the buyer side of this, and let's also look at like the dynamicism of deals accelerating here. We ran some data pre-COVID and post-COVID, and what we found across the platform data, the aggregate data on the platform is that post-COVID, intent seems to be a little bit different. And I think when we get the poll results, we're gonna get some data across this group that's on sales this webinar right now.
Yeah.
But what we found is that time from sent to complete on deals actually went down, which is an indication of higher intent and a speedier funnel for post-COVID opportunities.
Yeah, and my guess is that's for specific product sets.
Correct.
Here's our poll results, and our audience in general is seeing slower to close. But again, as you mentioned earlier, it really all depends on what you're selling, right?
Yeah, I think, and we're gonna get into this even more on in the aggregate data, but there's this real tangible effect of pre-COVID opportunities and post-COVID opportunities. If the deals came in, before mid-March, uh, they are actually slower to close. And stuff that comes in post-COVID, that the buyer intent seems to be higher because they've already kind of made this decision in their head that this is something that they're still interested in continuing. And so I think that's actually what this data shows. So do you want to talk about anything on this survey?
Yeah, I mean, just to pull it out real quick, so 85% are saying slower to close, 15% are saying faster. This next one is interesting. The fact that it's almost 50-50 between the
Hmm.
experience those in the call are having of their prospects having a perceived higher intent versus lower intent. I'm encouraged when we said there might be some nice silver linings here. I'm seeing that here from our sales community saying, hey, half of the folks on the call are actually seeing a higher intent. How we correlate higher intent with slower close, and then finally, yeah, the majority seem to be saying smaller deal size. Connecting those dots as we go through these slides, I think is going to be super interesting.
Yep, for sure. All right, let's keep on rolling then.
All right.
Um, so let's talk about the number of people in deals. So this is some research that we pulled together across customers that were both on platform and off platform. And I was surprised to see some of this. Like 13% of IT and software sellers were saying that there's at least 10 plus buyers in the deal. The 84% is at least three, but the mean was 5.6. What this is coming across is that buyers, it's not a one decision maker that you have to sell to. It's the buying committee. They're buying as a coalition across. Is this going to work for their business or not? And so I think the main takeaway here is that it's not just one decision maker. You have to sell your deal to the organization. The organization is buying it, and that team that's buying is made up of not only executive leadership. Depending on your vertical, it can be operations or finance or technical specialists, or it can be marketing. For PandaDoc, it's sales, marketing, rev ops people, and then also the financial buyer as well. The big key is that software sellers are reporting that they thought they knew the decision maker, but it actually changed during the selection process. And what their report is, this actually happens pretty consistently for them.
Yeah.
So this change in the DM is accelerating post-COVID when budgets move up a level.
Yeah, it makes sense. And for all the sort of newer reps on the call, or the ones that have been around for a while, the whole concept that to actually close an enterprise motion deal, you're going to need a number of folks involved in that deal. What we're hearing here is it's going to be, if it was 3 or 4 decision makers before, it's 5, 6, 7 now. It's an average of 5.6, and they're going upstream in terms of exact level approval. We have a quick question here, Nate, around as we navigate through this conversation. We have a bunch of people here that are from software industry and some that aren't. So what would you say for those that aren't in the industry? How applicable are some of the stats we're pulling out here?
So I think some of these stats are looking at IT and software decision makers. I've got about 2 more slides on those polls on the buyer side that we really reviewed for software and IT decision makers. We partnered with G2 Crowd to do that, which tends to be much more of a software review side. The rest of the stats after that are going to be homogenous across any type of seller. And so I think that's going to be really relevant.
Awesome.
Okay. This is one of those stats that I think is going to be a little bit homogenous, and that is that things change quickly, and that is that the buyers know that the decision makers change, and the sellers don't often know. The buyers are expecting this to change. Oftentimes, we're seeing in some decision making process like a hidden decision maker, and this is going more. This is happening more and more often as COVID budgets again move up a level. So I think this is something that while we interviewed software and IT decision makers, we're going to see this consistently across almost all verticals. This is an interesting piece of data around how many changes happen once a proposal is sent. And so the main takeaway here is that once a proposal is in flight, it's very rarely the one that gets signed. The norm here is at least 3 changes on that document. And one of the key takeaways here is if you don't have a mechanism to manage change management with either new signers, new scope of work, new pricing, you get into kind of like a soup of Word documents
Yeah.
or PDFs or email chains that get really nasty. So keeping that stuff clean is really the like one of the name of the games of the hallmark of the dynamic deal that is really the like what we're finding is in the state of the deal.
This is powerful information, right? As sales reps, I put myself in that category. Um, we tend to not be as tight on the details. Not everyone, there's some great detail focused reps, but a lot, we get a little bit sloppy when it comes to thinking, okay, what are all the key things that are going to actually make it really easy to get this thing signed so that we can reduce the number of times that this thing needs to get iterated, take it down from 8 to 5 to 3 on average to hopefully almost 0. So for those listening, I think this is like gold, right? Like we're finding a data point we otherwise wouldn't have access to if we didn't have Nate sharing this, and I think it's super powerful.
Yeah, what we're also seeing here is this is consistent between both buyers and sellers, which is some of the other things that the buyer was thinking that it was going to change more. And you're going to see in the next set of data, really what we're trying to get to is into the hearts and minds of both the buying experience and the sales mindset. So as we move into the next set of data here, it's really about how do sales teams prioritize their buyer wishes and the wishes. And the crux from the State of the Deals report, just to be pretty, transparent, is that in this new kind of modern dynamic deal, especially now the modern remote dynamic deal, it's all about a personalized experience, building trust, and the timing of response to the buyer. And it happens to be pretty technology driven. So we're going to talk about each one of these in both the buyer side and the seller side on this. So here's a lot of data, and this is aggregate data across industry and across platform. So personalization. So the data here is really showing that personalization is absolutely critical, but sellers actually weighed it less than buyers did. And so with a bunch of salespeople on this call, like in your mind, how important do you think personalization is, and how important do you think like that personalization is to closing the doc? Well, when we did the report, 64% of you thought it was really important. But the buyer actually expected the salesperson to be able to personalize and really understand that their specific needs and be able to personalize that material back to them much more than the seller did. So this is a big takeaway. Personalization really, really matters.
Can
But we'll
you
talk about it in timing in a second.
Yeah, Nate, can you give us a couple examples? Like, I'm just thinking in our own sales motion, when I send something out for signature, I often just hit send for signature. I don't do a personalized note saying, hey, Jane, really awesome chatting with you yesterday. Here's the final doc for your review. Is that what you mean by personalization in the final stage?
So it can be. I think there's a broader fit for it, which is, and we're going to talk about timing in a second here. So I'm going to talk about both of them together. So if you think about the kind of the state of the modern buyer, if they're inbound or on probably the second or the third call outbound, um, the buyer intent is actually much higher. They've done a bunch of research. They've typically investigated whether or not this solution is important to them in their current business environment, and if you're in a category that is ranked and has review sites, then they're oftentimes review site shopping before they hit you, right? And so the timing and this personalization has everything to do with, you have to set yourself apart by knowing what that buyer is doing and being able to take them through the buying process for your company as it fits them, not as it fits you. And so if they come to you with specific challenges and pains, then you need to present the buying process back to them, solving those pains and problems. And if you don't do that, they're going to think it's less personalized. So it's not just about getting their name right on the document. It's about putting the right information in the proposal or in the document that fits their particular need. And what we're finding is that you need to be able to do it quick, right? Because buyers actually weighed speed of response higher than sellers. And so the fact that if you can turn around a personalized document or personalized proposal or send specific marketing collateral for them and their industry and their size at the time when they right after they've talked to you about it, then that is going to be very impressive to them, because really they're looking at timing and your ability to respond to them as one of the key things that they're shopping for, because that's going to be how good of a partner you are.
That's like a mic drop moment, at least in my mind. So we get asked all the time at replays by sales reps, how can I have a better win rate? How can I have a message that resonates more with the prospect? And there are lots of neat things that you can do, and techniques and scalable techniques. But this one thing, right? If like, there's a bunch of things you're going to leave sales leaders and sales reps with today. But even if they just leave with this one thing, that, hey, response time and that next email that gets sent you from your product, from your prospect, or getting that agreement to them or what have you, actually matters more than you think. So I think that's just a wonderful takeaway. And two things kind of come to mind here too, Nate. I'm curious in your thoughts. Like, when we think about the individualized, personalized experience, in one frame, I think of like challenger sale motion, right? Understand individual value drivers. And not only when you're doing your discovery and your prospecting, not just understanding the organizational pain points and needs and the pain behind, like the need, the impact of those pains, but what's keeping your champion up at night? What is it? What KPIs, what metrics are actually driving their behavior? And then the second lens I'm thinking about it through is actual motion of sales. And I think you hit on it a minute ago very succinctly, which is, let's not get all caught up in how we like to sell. Let's get caught up in how our prospects like to buy. And what you're doing is opening up the hood here and actually showing us how prospects like to buy. So I love it.
Let's talk about that trust and relationship, right? Because one of the interesting things was that we found, I was surprised at this. Sellers believe that they're building trust. And they say that it's really important in closing the deal. And the relationship between the salesperson and the buyer is really important, 82%. Hey, I think I'm doing a great job. It's my job to build trust. I've done a great job. Well, actually, the buyers are saying that, yeah, trust is important in their purchase decision. And they think that the relationship with the rep actually drove that. But what we just showed you is your ability to present stuff back to them quickly is how you build that trust. And if you personalize it, and personalization, I mean, there's no way to lose trust faster than putting the wrong name on a document going out, right? So that's just the simplest piece. But if you've asked a whole bunch of pain discovery and objection handling questions, and you've done a great job in your sales process of doing that, and you don't put that in the document, right, in a way that shows that you listen to them, then they're going to be weighing in on this and think, I don't know if he really gets me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. We just saw this today. We were looking at this review of a demo that a sales rep did, and they had a real nice summary of what the pain points were. And hey, we all know that PowerPoints aren't our favorite thing for prospects or buyers to be looking at. But to actually have a quick level set at the beginning of your call to make sure that they know you heard them in terms of what their needs are individually and organizationally, super powerful. And I guess the data is supporting that here.
Yeah, it does. And we're also seeing that if you're in an industry where review sites play a role here, um,
Yeah.
review sites can build an incredible amount of trust between the buyer and the company. That it's really the salesperson's job not to screw up, right? And
Yeah.
so personalization and timing become a great way to show that the trust that they're putting in your company is actually valuable, and you can lean into those pretty well.
Yeah.
Um, so this is part of the survey data that we did to hundreds of sales leaders, and we were really talking here about what kind of tools are they using to drive their dynamic sales process. And we were surprised to find that you know 70% were using a CRM, but 30% weren't, and but only 10% considered that the CRM is like a priority for them. Um, as part of this, we also looked and saw and found that really only 27-30% of vendors are using a software tool to help them in their sales workflow process. So most of the sales community horizontally is still using PDFs and Word documents or Google documents and stuff that's kind of offline, and maybe even upload and sign, right? But they don't really have a workflow product that helps them address this speed, timing, and also helping drive through these multiple buyers, and getting all 3 to 10 of those people in that buying process like collaborating and working on the same deal and making sure that that deal is going through properly.
Yeah. And it makes me think of how Amazon, for example, has just completely changed the game in terms of our consumer expectations of when something should get shipped and arrive, right? Like you're a Prime member, at least pre-COVID, we're thinking 1 to 2 days. And they changed the game in buyer perceptions. And organizations like PandaDoc are changing the game in what a buyer expects. And if they're dealing with a vendor that is on the ball and uses software to turn things around quickly versus someone who will take that, I don't know, that NDA and just send a PDF saying, hey, please fill this out. Like there's going to be almost a gut response. I know I have it when someone sends me an NDA to fill out now and it's not in some form of software. I get a little angry, to be honest with you. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts on all that?
I think what you're talking about is the anything that the seller can do to keep the process moving quickly, and not take the buyer off of their kind of game, is valid. So if you send somebody, an offline PDF, hey, sign this NDA. A lot of people like they're like, oh man, I don't even have a printer at home. I literally can't offline sign something right now.
Oh, right.
Right? Like, so I'm like, okay, I guess I got to go do something over here. Or I have a print file. We actually created a website, so I'll create my signature file, and print that, and you can stick it in something.
Yeah.
Or I'll just point them to PandaDoc's freemium product, and be like, hey, sign up for that and send it to me because it's going to be a lot easier for you. So I think it's this anything that we can do to use technology to increase our chances. And also what we're finding post COVID is that teams that have moved to a technology platform to streamline their workflow are going to be much better able to handle moving remote, and the fact that they're keeping their workflow and their CRM processes and all that stuff even when they switch offices is highly valuable. So let's dive into a little bit of the future of the sales of an elite sales team here.
Yeah.
Um, so so what we found pre-COVID, and I think that we did this report, we did this little survey to the team here, is that sales teams, the data around the decision makers and revisions is proving the point that the sailors know, and that is they're dynamic deals. We may be selling more. The sales cycle is is longer because more people are involved in deals, and post COVID, more so, right? And so that really goes to the point that if you had a deal coming through in pre-COVID, it's going to take a lot longer. You might have been selling more pre-COVID, but we're going to talk about some of the impacts of that on prices in a little bit here.
Right.
But a dynamic sales team has a workflow. They can create, they can customize, they can revise documents, and they have insights. They know what's happening in the deal, and they know what participants are entering the deal or exiting. And so one of the core features that our team uses and people on PandaDoc uses is like deal insights. They can tell when a new entry comes into a deal, what page they come in, what they're pausing on. And we can see when somebody's coming in and out of a deal. And so at the end of the month, for me, I'm looking at which deals in my funnel haven't had activity in 24 hours. And that's where I'm coaching my team to go back and say, hey, you haven't had activity on this document, something's off, right? And it helps the sales team focus in on the problem that they're at in that particular part of the funnel. So buyers want a personalized proposal experience, and they want to know how to use these documents. Especially your champions need to use these documents to get the deal done with your help. And so that really has everything to do with the experience, the buying experience. It needs to be accurate, and your proposal and your document experience ideally is beautiful. And if your documents are professional, it's going to reflect really well on you. And be ready for a lot of revisions.
And if you're not doing it, your competitors might be, right? So, we always want to be a step ahead, but as a sales rep, I think, wait a sec, if I'm not doing this and my competitor is, does that put me behind or ahead? Probably behind, right? So these get me thinking about those kind of things.
Yeah. So we ran some more data post-COVID. And here's what we're seeing across kind of some of the platform data, and data compared from February 17th to March 2nd, and then the last 2 weeks in March. I haven't run the data again for April. And I think we saw this in our own poll, right? So the poll we just did reflects deal values down. I wish we could flash the poll back so people could see both of them at the same time. I don't know, Alex, if that's possible. But not there you go. So here's what this group was experiencing, and here's what the data was showing us across the PandaDoc. Deal values down 18%. So smaller deals on average. So we're having to discount. We're having to discount to pull deals through COVID. And I think also buyers are also price shopping much harder than they have in the past, and we're seeing that impacted. And so discounting, giving approval in your sales team to be able to discount to get deals across the finish line seems to actually be a tactic that's actually really relevant. Sent deals are down 11% globally and 6% in the US. So overall, all the aggregate data is we're seeing like less deal volume, but for teams that were dynamic, we're actually seeing the number of deals increased per week. So like the number of deals on that for teams that have gone remote and on a platform are actually increasing. So the sales team, what this is showing is the sales team know that the economy has changed and everybody's working harder, and they're using documents to try and drive buyers through the funnel. And if they came in post-COVID, we're seeing kind of the time it takes to complete a document drop. And I think that has a lot to do with the higher intent post-COVID. If they came into your funnel post-COVID and they've already gone through kind of the shock and awe period, now in April, May, we're going to start seeing time to deal drop a little bit as people are still knocking off their priorities.
Okay, cool. We've got a question here from Marcus saying, Nate, why aren't salespeople working with the prospect to co-develop the proposal along the way to minimize any required changes?
So
what do you see there?
Yeah, so I'll just talk to you a little bit about our sales team for a second and our experience also after the deals in flight. So typically we're working with one or two people in the deal team on the buyer side. And our team is literally working with them. When they're ready for a proposal, we'll literally craft the proposal with them and send it to them. And so you would expect that is going to have the least amount of revisions, right? Wrong, right? Because the person that you're talking to oftentimes is not the decision maker. And so they're going through so a change can be another person entering in. Oh, you got to change the signature block. My director can no longer sign this, has to be my VP, right? A change might be, hey, we're going to add a couple more users. We're going to take away a couple of users. We need to refactor this pricing. And so there may be something that happens on the pricing and it comes down or up depending on what the experience is. But what is consistent about that is there's some consistent personalization that's already taken place with that kind of that champion that's coming through that we're building off of, and then changes that happen afterwards are still happening. So hopefully that answers the question.
Cool. Yep. And then another one here around discounting and the fact that we've got someone having quite a guttural response saying, "Hey, this should be the last resort. It's a shame to see folks discounting during these times. Let's sell on value." I think we can all agree selling on value is the way to go. I also think that there's been a number of organizations that have been trying to help out as partners during this time for existing customers, but also new ones. Well, what's your how do you see that?
Yeah, I think so I'm a CRO. I hate to see discounting, right? Like, I also hate to see deals hung up for too long. And so I think there is sometimes a logical trade that has to happen um, between to move a deal through, and especially if you're in a recurring revenue um, type, like whether it's SaaS or another recurring revenue type product, um, that hopefully you can regain some of that later. But what this data is showing you is this is aggregate across a lot of different customers. We have over 17,000 on platform, and we're finding deals values down. This isn't just, this isn't PandaDoc. This is just like overall.
Yeah.
And if we flash back that survey information, it's happening here as well on this call, and it may just be deal size. So deal value may not be a discount. People are buying less.
Yeah.
Maybe it's discounting happening on the same size deal in order to get people to move through that size deal, and you're going to have to give a little bit on that. Or maybe it's just people are buying less. Or we're also seeing, if you're a seat based, there's actually just less seats to occupy in some of these businesses.
Yeah,
I hope that answers the question.
That's a really good point. Yep, I think so. Awesome.
Okay. So, this is a pre-COVID. This is pre-COVID that when we work with teams, the dynamic sales teams are actually over-reporting in their last quarter or so. This was Q4, and most of them are reporting as shorter sales cycles. So again, the data isn't clean post-COVID, but what we do know is that sales team, you have to adapt to remote selling, and remote selling is really kind of the name of the game. And remember that you're not just remote selling, they're remote buying as well. And so the buying community is also having to use the documents to share those internally in order to get a deal through their organization. So for PandaDoc, we look at it as a way to think about workflow, experience, speed, and workflows, insight, speed, and experience. We look at this as like, what is the sales workflow, and how does your team operate, and how do you approve deals inside, and how fast can you get deals out the door? Insights is really, do you know when new buying information is coming in? How many of your documents are expired? How many of them haven't had activity in some amount of time? And so this is really analytics on the insight period. Speed for us is speed to personalization. So it's speed and experience. How fast can you get something out? How personalized can it be? And then the experience is really also about the sum value of the experience for the buyer. So we've actually taken this and moved it. It's not just from the sales side. We've actually taken this, and this I think is really relevant now for revenue teams that are thinking about upsell and retention. And that is, we've taken these insights that we are having of where we think we can help a team impact their sales experience, and then we move it all the way through to their success plan and how we report back our QBRs. So I think the pattern here for salespeople is really, what value are you going to be bringing to your customer long term, and how do you show that pre-sales and then back it up post-sales to continue to build trust.
Absolutely.
So we we rolled on this.
Yeah, we did. Awesome. Let's throw this out to the group here for more questions. We did have a couple questions throughout here, but we're going to need a bit more context. So Christy Bryan was saying, asking, could you elaborate more on use personas? And this goes back to a former slide where it was around marketing collateral. She's saying, is it marketing collateral, demos, etc. So again, she was asking, could you elaborate more on the use personas in this slide?
Yeah. So I think so. There's two things. There's the ICP, your ideal customer profile, and then personas. So for example, who do you sell to and what do they need, and how has that persona changed pre and post COVID? So for example, if you're selling to a VP of sales and making their number is really, really important to them, but also having some type of management process as all their team has gone remote and being able to, so for Dave, for your company, for example, right, like that, what that VP of sales cares about has changed slightly. And how do you do coaching in a remote environment when all your team is kind of all over the place? How do they do that when they're not sitting there right next to them and hearing their call in real time, for example? Yeah. So I think that to answer her question, there's this ideal customer profile, which is who do you sell to? If you have one of these, you're going to be able to tell pretty quickly whether or not a customer is right for you and you have a high chance to close. If you use personas, you're going to be able to customize the experience for that persona much faster. And so the difference between a marketing person coming in and talking to you and a legal person coming in and talking to you or a salesperson coming in, everybody has their different kind of buyer personas. And so knowing who those are ahead of time is really one of the factors that I think training teams on who those personas are before before they're hitting those calls is really important. Dave, maybe you have something to add to that.
Well, yeah, I think those are great points. And when we talk about the fact that it's important to match up how you sell to how your prospect buys, yes, that's absolutely important. And it's a point we talk about with our customers all the time. But remember, if you've been in this role, let's say you're an account executive, you've been in your role for a couple of years, you have guided just a ton of deals through, right? If you're a large enterprise, maybe it's, 20 a year, 30 a year, 40 a year. Maybe if you're transactional, it's like 20, 30 a month. The point is, there's rarely going to be an objection or concern that you haven't heard before when you look at an individual buyer persona. So when you've got a deal on the table and you hear it's going to go to the CFO, you can be pretty sure that one of the questions that CFO is going to ask is one of the same questions that's been asked in your last 200 deals. And so there will be some new ones sometimes, and you can make a hypothesis on how theirs may be different given post-COVID or areas that are unique to the deal. My point is, just don't diminish the fact. So this is my message to sales reps. Don't diminish the fact that you actually come from a position of strength and knowledge in terms of helping guide your prospects through decisions. Yes, use their process, but also fall back on, talk tracks like, hey, in terms of the next step, this is what we recommend. Here's why. We found that our customers really find this, and this useful. But of course, cater that to the individual persona. Okay, we've got another couple questions here. Let's see. And by the way, for those of you asking questions, please make sure you throw it in just a reminder to put it in the Q&A area as opposed to chat. And there's just some great questions here. Okay, let's see. From Nitesh, are you seeing any difference between new sales activities versus renewals post-COVID? Oh, renewals. Well, that's an interesting aspect. Was there any specific data that comes to mind for you there?
Sure. So one of the first things, and this is just kind of PandaDoc looking at there, we're an SMB, like a kind of lower end mid-market focused company. So we're very, COVID is hitting a lot of customers in the SMB space right now. And so I think the question is really around like what is happening in the renewal process. So we actually use PandaDoc in our renewal process as well. And so we have a staged renewal process, just like we have a staged new business prospect. I will just say that contraction and churn is real in Q2. It is happening. For our customers, we're having to do a lot of interesting things around, innovative pricing, uh, innovative, billing arrangements, um, moving from annual to quarterly or something like that. We're also seeing, upsells and expansion be just much harder to come by as customers are not really sure. Many customers are just not really sure if they're in growth mode anymore, and a lot of customers are in shrink mode. So all of that is coming into the renewal process, and contraction and churn is real in the SMB space. I hope that answers the question.
It does for me, for sure. And someone was asking a minute ago what an EBR was. I think they probably mean QBR, so quarterly business review.
Sorry, yeah. So that's this slide here. Yeah, so we do executive business reviews or quarterly business reviews with our customers that show them what is actually happening on the platform. And like, there's nothing worse that if you're a software buyer and or a buyer of services and you go to the quarterly business review, the executive business review, and they don't really have any value to you. So we're actually trying to really provide a high degree of benchmarking and kind of not just usage, but kind of how that usage compares with others in order to provide insights to our customers. And we just rolled through some of this with our customer advisory board and rolled through some of this information. They gave us even more stuff like, hey, provide us better insights on this as well. So we're kind of constantly striving to improve on how do we add value every quarter to a customer.
That's great. So your QBRs aren't just internal. There's an external component with customer advisory boards as well.
Correct. So we do EBRs with our customers.
That's
right. So for them, and then we do. Then we obviously also do our own reviews of our own business. But then EBRs for us is customer facing or CAB facing, customer advisory board facing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay.
We're just all trying to learn.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the voice of the customer is everything. And so, interesting question here for you. So from, is it Retchi? Sorry if I messed the name up. But what kind of updates can we expect from PandaDoc in short term, taking into consideration the insights you've shared today?
So I think there's I'm going to answer this not from the product perspective, but more from are we going to be doing these kind of state of the deals more often so that we can provide this level of deal insight? The intention here was this was supposed to be V1, and we're going to be doing V2, V3, things like that. We're actually already on We're going to have to move to V3 because post-COVID, we tried to drop some more information. So this is actually the merger of like a pre-COVID information and post-COVID. So we're already kind of moving to V3. How is all of this kind of impacting the product as well? Like, well, we've done a huge amount of insights and trying to do benchmarking insights in order to present that back to customers and make it easier for them to digest.
Cool. Okay. And, this is, what I love about that question too is, there's, as soon as I saw this deck and we had our first conversation the other day about this, I knew there'd be an appetite for this out there. So I love that there's validation here. People want to hear more about what you're seeing and how that can translate into sales motion and product features as well. And one of just kind of a general question here from Brendan, what are the industries that require digital solutions the most in this COVID-19 period? I mean, we both have our thoughts on that based on everything we're seeing in the news, et cetera, but is there any specific data you've come across that would inform us on that answer?
I think that the companies and the industries like education and things like that were most surprised and have not been traditionally remote are doing that as digital buying and dynamic deals kind of intersect with remote and industries in ascension and industries in change. That's where you're going to see the most of that. So I would just point to places like that, which you haven't seen a lot of this yet. So like there is some of those industries like education, things like that.
Oh yeah, for sure. I've got 3 little kids that I'm helping homeschool right now, and my hat's off to the teachers that are just doing a phenomenal job of harnessing the technology to to help make this happen. Shannon's asking us, do you know the typical sales cycle time? So this is a very specific answer that I don't think we had on one of the previous slides, but you may have this somewhere. Do you know the typical sales cycle time pre-COVID for SaaS solution sales versus post-COVID for Fortune 500 companies?
I don't, not for Fortune 500. I'm sorry, I don't. It's a good question. Maybe there's somebody on this call who does though. So let's consider crowdsourcing that. If you know it, please type it, and maybe we'll percolate that here.
Yeah, that's great.
I can just talk to kind of SMB and mid market. I don't know, Dave. What have you seen?
You know, I don't have enough relevant data to share there. Honestly, it's so anecdotal. But I do find that the sales for our customers, the sales it comes down to buying intent. So there's way more folks that when they want something, they're actually making a decision to move forward right away, versus taking a lot longer to make a decision. And then those that were in the pipeline pre-COVID, just like your numbers suggest, a lot of those deals got pushed and are taking longer to close.
Correct.
And then it comes down to need, right? Some of these organizations, educational, the whole educational sector being a great example of that, they need Google Classroom, or if they need Zoom, they need it now. That buying intent is like, I need it now, need to launch it tomorrow. So it really is just so situational. We've only got a couple more minutes left, and if there are any other questions, please throw them into the chat here. Interesting. So Bharat is saying, do you see any change needed in the messaging to clients? And I know you've talked a little bit about that in terms of individualization, et cetera. And I'd love to get a little bit more context, but how would you take that question and kind of run with it?
I think respecting priority changes and making sure that, and I think it has something to do. So the previous question was really talking about like buyer personas.
Yeah.
And I would say that every single one of my buyer personas has had an impact and change to COVID. And so objections are going to be different, pricing needs, priorities are going to be different. There's been shifts in all of those things. Some of that is resulting in slowing down of the funnel. Some of that is resulting in acceleration of the funnel. And so I say yes, that kind of each persona has a difference there. I answered it from the persona perspective and not necessarily an individual. So Dave, I think maybe, as you're coaching reps, how do you talk to people about this right now?
We are 100% talking to them about understand. Well, you know what it all comes back to every single time is truly diving into understanding that customer need and the impact of the need. I mean, if I could just emphasize one thing enough, emphasize enough, it would be that. We've got one last question here, and then let's close off. Man, what an engaged audience today. Thanks for all the questions today, guys. This is from Melissa. With respect to trends in the sales landscape today, do you find customer success teams and renewal teams may influence sales or become more of an influence on the decision maker?
Specifically for expansion, for sure. Right. So if you want to grow your business, then with that particular customer, then success of that CS and the renewal team is critical, especially if you're moving into another department, having to execute another contract with another division of the company. So it's all about like, did you provide the value that you promised? We have a saying. There's like a KPI. It's a kept promise indicator, right? Did you keep your promise?
I like that.
You made in sales all the way through that process. And for flat and contraction, I think it also is highly relevant as well. So hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, I love that. That's fantastic. Well, that brings us pretty much to time here. Nate, I want to thank you so much. I know one of your goals here was to leave some very actionable insights, not just insights, but actual actions people can take. And I've personally gathered several from this discussion. So thank you for that. Really enjoyed the chat. And for everyone here, thank you for joining. We really appreciate it. Thanks for making it an engaging discussion. And we will be following up by email with a recording as well as PDF. Nate, final comments for you?
Sure. So we will drop the deck, and there'll also be links to some of the assets and takeaways on all this. So some people ask specifically about, hey, was there more data behind all of this? Yes. Go to the State of the Deals report. You can Google State of the Deals report 2020 for PandaDoc and download it. And so we also put in the G2 research information as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Nate. And thank you, everyone, for joining, and have a fantastic day.